It seems unthinkable that the likes of Mr. Perfect, Jake Roberts, Ted DiBiase and so on never got the chance to reign with the WWE title. But there's only so much space at the top of the card and not everyone can have their go. But what about WWE stars that were not just considered for the belt but were fingertips away from actually grabbing it? The history books would have been totally different if original plans had been seen to fruition. I'm Cy for WhatCulture.com and these are 10 WWE wrestlers promised titles that never got them. Number 10. Wade Barrett, WWE Championship. In 2010, the Nexus debuted on main roster WWE TV and instantly became the leading story in the company due to their propensity for abject destruction. At the head of the table sat the charismatic Wade Barrett, who proved time and time again on the microphone that he was a born top heel. When the group was resoundingly beaten at Survivor Series by Team WWE, led by John Cena, who pushed backstage to come out on top, Barrett went on to 2 losses to then WWE Champion Randy Orton. If the Nexus had succeeded in their first major outing, would Barrett have been pushed to champion status? Regardless, it wasn't the only time that Barrett was put on track to major success. In 2011, it seemed that Wade was primed for a solid solo push. He had left the failing Core stable, dropped the Intercontinental title, and was part of the Money in the Bank ladder match. In an interview with What Culture in 2016, Barrett revealed that not only had he been picked to win the briefcase, but they'd even rehearsed it. This was apparently changed an hour before the show. Considering that at this time nobody had failed to cash in, this very well could have been Barrett's redemption, but ultimately became yet another chance slipping through his fingers. Number 9. Aleister Black, United States Championship. Whilst he had a palpable impact on NXT, Aleister Black's time on WWE's main roster never felt as though it got properly started before he was released. According to Black though, it wasn't as if the WWE writing room was ignoring him. They made plans, but most never amounted to much. Speaking on a livestream in 2020, Black revealed that there was a moment where he was supposed to win the US title, but then Vince's consensus was, I don't want to have him win his first title in front of no audience. It's hard to know if this move was made out of genuine concern for Black's career, or perhaps as an excuse to keep him away from establishing himself. After all, whilst Paul Heyman was famously in favour of Black's skills, his heavily tattooed and death metal persona don't scream the hallmarks of a Vince McMahon project. Furthermore, this reasoning falls apart when you realise many first-time main roster champions, such as Drew McIntyre and Rhea Ripley, were crowned in front of the screens of WWE's Thunderdome. In fact, Zelina Vega, Black's wife, said in an appearance with the Chasing Glory podcast that he was due to win the title from her on-screen client Andrade. For the man who did so, Apollo Crews, it was his first title win and it was with no crowd in attendance. So, what gives? Number 8. Muhammad Hassan, World Heavyweight Championship. Despite being on WWE television for less than a calendar year, Muhammad Hassan's controversial character saw him rise to notoriety. He was featured in segments alongside some of the biggest names in the business, such as Hogan, Stone Cold and The Undertaker, which isn't a privilege that every rookie gets. It was going to get even bigger, however. With SummerSlam looming that August, Vince wanted a heel for babyface World Heavyweight Champion Batista to drop the belt to, and at the time there was no one attracting more heat than Hassan. Considering the event was to be held in Washington, D.C., not only the nation's capital but also Batista's home city, it seemed like the perfect hot plate for a huge crowd reaction. However, Hassan's Western critical character jumped the shark when, after losing a number 1 contendership match to The Undertaker, he seemed to pray for the arrival of masked ne'er-do-wells. Unfortunately, this segment infamously aired on the evening of a real terrorist attack in London, which drew mass controversy to the company. The long and short of which saw Hassan's character written off TV and led to his eventual release. Despite the fact it didn't happen, it's plain to see that Hassan as champion was the direction the company had been heading. Number 7. Lacey Evans, Raw Women's Championship. On paper, Lacey Evans should be a can't-miss babyface, a tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed All-American with a rough background that she overcame to become a mother and a soldier for her country. And yet these elements make crowds much more prone to boo her in that we get it, you're oh so great kind of way. To top it off, a smug and vindictive Evans is just more entertaining to watch than seeing her attempt to be the overcoming all odds babyface. Evans found a twisted kind of momentum in January 2021 when she began to flirt and eventually enter an on-screen relationship with Ric Flair. Angering his daughter and WrestleMania mainstay Charlotte, this was all part of setting up a program that would take them both to the show of shows. If the personal vendetta wasn't enough, WWE had the 2 battle for contendership to Asuka's Raw Women's Championship. Lacey came out on top and the match was booked for Elimination Chamber. But just as quickly as it came, it was pulled from the card when the following week Evans revealed that she was legitimately pregnant. Had this not been the case, Evans would have captured her first title in WWE and defended it against Charlotte at WrestleMania 37 as the top heel. Number 6. Ryback, WWE Championship. When you consider how fast the Feed Me More charts got over and the size of Ryback's big meaty neck muscles, then it's not surprising that Vince was high on him. Quickly shot into the main event in his first year, it always seemed possible that Mr. McMahon was going to pull the trigger on Ryback one day. Apparently, it was at least dangled in front of the big guy around his last couple of years within the company. Talking to the Angle podcast, Ryback detailed that he lost his Intercontinental Championship because he didn't sign a contract extension that the WWE put in front of him. To get his John Hancock on the dotted line, Vince and Ryback verbally made some agreements. These included a heel turn, switching out the singlet for trunks, and a WWE Championship run, which Ryback then explained got demoted down to the US title and putting over Kalisto. You should always take what the big guy says with a pinch of salt. Vince allegedly also promised that he'd let him squash AJ Styles at WrestleMania. But considering Vince's Arlo U1 reputation, this at least seems plausible. Number 5. Bronson Reed, NXT Championship. Despite feeling like its own little pocket universe which is often meticulously designed, especially during its better, blacker and golder years, NXT is still a wrestling promotion. That means all kind of different story ideas and considerations are taken into account, and just like main roster WWE, some of these possibilities apparently get passed on to the stars that concern them. Appearing on Sami Callihan's podcast, former NXT star Bronson Reed said that he was still intent on becoming a top guy in the world of pro wrestling, and that had been Triple H's intentions for him. In the words of the now Jonah Rock, "I was destined to become the top guy in the black and gold brand. That's what was supposed to happen. It was what I was promised. But as we all know, promises don't get kept a lot in professional wrestling." Reed doesn't mention a world championship run explicitly, but what else could he mean? There's no spot greater in NXT than holding onto the title, which, despite its standing as a developmental brand, has a seriously impressive lineage. Every man who has ever held it has made something of himself in WWE and or elsewhere, and it would have done wonders for Reed. Instead, he was unceremoniously released in August 2021 before his destiny could be fulfilled. Number 4. Mr. Kennedy, World Heavyweight Championship. When Mr. Kennedy arrived in WWE, it was immediately clear that the company was getting behind him for good reason. He had a strong look, he was solid in the ring, and he had unteachable charisma. As such, it wasn't really surprising that Mr. Kennedy got his hands on the Money in the Bank briefcase when he did. Considering that previous winners, Edge and Rob Van Dam, had both successfully traded the case for a championship, it was obvious that WWE had designs to do the same for Kennedy. With the Mr. McMahon's exploding limo story occurring that summer, and Kennedy vowing to cash in at WrestleMania, the company's vision for the following year was Shane McMahon as on-screen CEO and a newly crowned Mr. Kennedy as champion. However, Kennedy's time in WWE can be defined as pure distilled bad luck. Seriously, you could have bottled essence of Mr. Kennedy and sold it as a curse for your worst enemies. A suspected injury, which turned out to be a hematoma, forced Kennedy to defend and lose the briefcase to Edge, who would go on to successfully cash in. And with the very real Benoit tragedy putting a stop to Mr. McMahon's fake death, the plans fell to pieces. Continued suspension saw Kennedy slip down the card before his release, leaving him to find world title success in TNA instead. Number 3. Chyna, WWF Championship. Chyna, despite being WWF Women's Champion only once, remains one of the most important women in WWE history. She turned the tide on what women's characters could be and the involvement of female stars in men's spaces as she routinely got physical with her male colleagues. Most memorably, of course, she was the first woman to enter the Royal Rumble and King of the Ring tournament, and is still the only woman to hold the Intercontinental Championship. She was also the first woman to become #1 contender for the WWF Championship, but lost the opportunity and never made it to the match itself. However, that wasn't Chyna's only brush with the company's biggest prize. Chyna's former manager, Anthony Anzaldo, confirmed in 2020, claims that the star had made herself that Vince once offered her the belt in exchange for one favour. In Anzaldo's words, they offered her the WWE Championship belt, but Vince said, "You can't do Playboy." She chose Playboy over the belt. This decision made her a star in her own right for a short time, but may have burned bridges with the WWE for good. Chyna's foray into adult entertainment following her Playboy appearances are often suspected as one reason why she still hasn't had her own independent Hall of Fame induction. Number 2. William Regal, WWE Championship. In 2008, Regal shocked the world by winning the King of the Ring tournament, slumping into his throne at the end of the night with a malicious look on his face. Combining the coronation as king with his general manager role, Regal would describe himself as the most powerful entity in the WWE. Proving his hunger for control and respect, in a particularly memorable episode of Raw, Regal screamed at Kevin Dunn to take the show off the bloody air due to feeling slighted by WWE fans. It was shocking and fresh, and best of all, it's widely believed that Regal's previous in-ring dalliances with Randy Orton and Triple H were going to put him in contention for the WWE title, until Regal was kayfabe fired due to a wellness policy violation. Whilst never outright written in stone, all Regal needed to do was keep up the momentum of his character. He was hated by WWE fans in the best way, and putting the title around his waist for the first time ever would have been the right move. Regal himself has admitted that he was studying dictators, so we can only wonder how creatively wicked he could have gotten reigning the show as boss, king and champion. However, with a very real 60-day suspension for the Brits, the storyline vanished into thin air, and so did the chances of Regal ever being WWE Champion. Number 1. Brutus the Barber Beefcake, WWF Intercontinental Championship. When it comes to WWF's most memorable characters from the 1980s, Brutus the Barber Beefcake is amongst them. With his garden shear prop, hair-obsessed gimmick and bright presentation, he's one of the superstars that casual or lapsed fans from the era are quickest to name. And yet, the only title he ever won was the WWF Tag Team Championship. That wasn't always the plan, however, but life got in the way of Brutus's ascension to mid-card gold. At the turn of the decade, Brother Bruti was engaged in a hot feud with Mr. Perfect and got the honour of being the first man in the company to pin Kurt Hennig during their WrestleMania 6 bout. From here, the plan was to take their story to the next level. They spent months on the house show circuit honing their perfect match, with the intended conclusion that Beefcake would beat Perfect at SummerSlam 1991 for the Intercontinental Championship. However, Beefcake's famous accident involving a parasailing friend put this ascension to champion to rest, as the star had to have life-altering surgery and took 2 years away from the business. According to Brutus, the company had toyed with the idea of giving him the strap multiple times over the 1980s, and this would have been a sure thing if not for this almost career-ending injury. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought of this video down in the comments below. Let us know of any other WWE superstars who have revealed that they were promised titles but never actually got around to getting them for whatever reason. Which of these would you have most liked to see capture that belt? Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe and hit that notification bell. I've been Cy for What Culture, and have a good week.